for homework last night, I asked you to finish through 1.7. So preparing yourself by doing the lesson through 1.7, maybe waiting on the quizzes until you feel like you have a good amount of confidence to do those, but that's up to you. Okay, those will be open up next week as well. So if you want to wait on those, you certainly may. But what I need you to do right now is make sure that you have submitted your crash course notes that you took from those 2 crash course movies. Okay, so you go into your Michigan virtual account, go on to AP Biology, making sure that you're submitting things in the right place. Go to Content. You already did this. I'm just going through it for those that are having difficulty or submitting things in the wrong place. And I have to look like a student so that it's not so confusing for you. And we are going to submit things in Content. Basically, you put things where you got them, okay? So you find the assignment that you did. So you got it from here. I mean, you could have gotten it from Google Classroom, but you find the assignment here, and that is where you submit it. So you're going to click Upload, and you should have saved things into your Google Drive, in your AP Biology folder, and into, we're really in Unit 2 now, so you may want to make yourself a Unit 2 folder, because remember we've already quizzed on Unit 1, which was your summer homework. We've already assessed that. So all this biomolecule stuff goes in a Unit 2 folder. So maybe now you can add a folder in your AP Biology and add a Unit 2 folder. This doesn't link directly to my Google Drive, but if you don't know how to make folders and you're not keeping all of your digital papers organized, you need to learn how to do that. So ask for how to do that from me or someone else. So upload your crash course biomolecules there. It should be completed. You should have filled in both of those videos, okay? Can you submit a photograph of it? Students tend to like to write things out sometimes. I would say if it's not a giant photograph, and if you're using like an iPhone 11, it's gonna be a really big photograph. So if you can learn how, if you know how to compress those to make them smaller, that's fine with me. When you're taking pictures with your Chromebook and submitting pictures of homework, make sure that it's clear. If I can't read the words, if it's blurry or it's all washed out, then it would be the same as not having it correct. So that's my answer to that, okay? I think the best way to submit things is to make a PDF of them because it's a very small file. It zips up quickly and then I can open it quickly to give you points, okay? If you need help with any of that stuff, file management, something like that, get help, okay? Otherwise, you're gonna be having a hard time when it comes time to study for tests and quizzes. All right, so that's our to-do list. Step 1, submit your crash course biomolecule movie notes for me for grading. I have been giving you guys grading feedback on your discussions. So just something to keep in mind, and you'll get better at this as the year goes on, and some of you were real good at this. Make sure when you are typing things out and you're giving responses in a college level course, you're very clear, you're using the content, you're not using opinion, okay? You're referencing what you learned, okay? So avoid that. Another thing is when you're doing your free response and your discussions, if you're given more than one prompt of what to address, it's nice to like number them or separate them with a paragraph so that the grader can make sure that you've hit both of those prompts. So this isn't an English class where you have to make things all in beautiful paragraphs. This is science, so it's totally okay for you to go 1 and then address that first prompt that you were given, and 2 and address the second prompt that you were given. It makes it really clear for the grader that you've hit both of the prompts, and it helps you organize it yourself in your mind, and you don't merge both of the prompts together in one answer that might not be complete. Does that make sense? We'll practice it a lot, and you'll get really good at writing essay responses to things. But just keep that in mind. The students that did that were more likely to get the full amount of points in the discussion. Okay, let's go to some interactive things to help some of these obscure organic chemistry stuff sink in. We're going to start by going through functional groups and giving you guys a better idea about those. Okay? So functional groups are basically the difference between a molecule, right? So what we tack onto a molecule makes it have the ability to react the way that it does, and it really creates that class of molecules. And we'll go through the functional groups that you need to be aware of, and then we're going to fill in just something very simple about those functional groups, because this is not organic chemistry. You don't need to know everything that's out there about organic molecules, but some key attributes so that you know how you'll be using these functional groups through the rest of the year will help you do better with that, okay? All right, so to help us do that, first off, let me just give you guys an example of the importance of functional groups. So functional groups separate whether or not you are male or female with a very, very similar molecule. These are both hormones, estradiol and testosterone. Notice how similar they are in their ring shape, right? And they both have a hydroxyl group here and a methane group here, right? The other thing that they don't share that makes them unique in the way that they react in the body and cause an outcome is we have a hydroxyl group here, and we have a carboxyl group here and a methane group here on this one. So this is the difference. Not very much, but it does create enough differences to completely turn you into a man or to turn you into a woman, okay? So it has the ability to turn gonads into testicles or gonads into ovaries. Like, that's how big those small differences are, okay? So keep that in mind. That's just an illustration of the importance. It might not seem like they're that different. They're very, very different, okay? Just because we're changing the functional groups on a particular molecule. The 7 functional groups that you need to be familiar with are listed up here. So we're going to do a foldable to help us memorize what we need to memorize to use it for the rest of the year. So this is where you pull out that blank piece of paper. And if you are a virtual student, lined or blank piece of paper at home to do this, okay? So we're going to take that paper and we want to make it into 3 sections, okay? So if you fold it like this, and you want to have it to be very long because we're going to add all 7 groups to this, okay? So you want to fold it this way. Maybe look at it from the side so that you can make sure each of your flaps in your foldable are even. If they're not totally even, it's not the end of the world. I mean, it might be bothering you, but this is a study tool. Okay, so now you have something that has 3 sections like this. Just kind of look up when you're at that point. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to be able to put all 7 functional groups on this. So I am not able to do it any other way, folding, unless we have 8, okay? So there'll be one little section in the bottom that's not a functional group. You can feel free to add something that you need to memorize for this test. On the bottom, you can choose whatever you want, but we're going to use 7 of the 8 that we make. So taking this, we're going to make 8 sections to it. So fold it in half 4 times. So fold it in half once, actually 3 times, I think. Fold it in half once, so we have 2 sections. Fold it in half twice, so we have 4 sections. Yeah, we just fold it 2 times. And then you fold it in half one more time, so that turns this foldable into having 8 sections. Okay? Once you've done that, you can open it up and show me that you're there. Maybe grab another one. You gotta fold it one more time. So it should look like this. Can you hold yours up so I can see who's got that and who doesn't? Okay, the next step is you're going to cut the outside flaps. You're not going to cut the middle, okay? I threw away the one that I made last hour. I'll show you it. I think I got it in the garbage. I crumpled it up. I'll just make a new one. Okay, so cutting the outside flaps, only not the center. So so that we can turn this into a foldable that allows us to study our functional groups. Think you got it? Need help?
I think I got it.
You got it. Looks good to me now. Hold it up and I'll make sure. So starting off with 3 sections. You can grab another paper. Do you want me to do the first fold for you? You can see. Okay, now that you've got all your flaps, fold it all together, just like your original fold. So it looks like this. Okay, I'll put it on the camera so you guys can see it better. Okay, so here we have our foldable. Our first flap right here, this is where we're going to write our first functional group. So you're going to write hydroxyl here. All the functional groups are on the slide. So you have your Chromebooks in front of you. You can just open this slide. The next one that you're going to write down is carbonyl group, etc. All the way down for all 7. So you might want to bring this slide up on your Chromebook as you're watching me do it on the camera. Okay? Now I have to make sure that I write them in the right order. I'll write them down and then I'll put this back. I'll show you what it looks like so that I don't write them in the wrong. You want to write them in the same order because this is the order that the notes are going to go in. So you're going to have 1 extra at the bottom. Choose to make that something else if you want, or you don't have to fill that in. We only have 7 of them.
Could you cut it off too?
You could cut it off. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, it's just like the quickest way for us to make that happen. Okay. So you're going to fill in the rest of this as we go through with the notes, okay? So if you don't quite write down on a flat, you'll have an idea of what you have to write down. So you don't have to memorize everything about these. I'm going to have you memorize just something very, very simple about them. And I'll tell you exactly what to put on each of the flaps as we go through. Okay? So the first one we want to talk about is our hydroxyl group. Okay? So this top one right here is our hydroxyl group. On the next flap, on this inner flap, you're going to write the formula for that. Okay? So the formula is right here in the notes, in that gray box. What did I do? So on that second flap, you're going to have, underneath hydroxyl, you're going to have the functional group, okay, of what it looks like. So the purpose of this is to study. You can study by going, okay, what does the hydroxyl group look like? And then you can say it out loud or in your mind, and then you can check to see if you got it right. Or you can do it the other way around, right? You could have all of the structures and be like, what's the name of that? And you definitely should do it both ways. So you should be able to recognize the functional group in a chemical formula and know the name. And conversely, if you're given the name, you should know what the functional group looks like. On the very inside, you're going to write 1 or 2 words, really, maybe a sentence, so not much. This is not organic chemistry. You're just going to write how we're going to use these functional groups in AP Biology, okay? So what did you write for hydroxyl? For hydroxyl, when you have that, it makes it an alcohol. So in that space on the very inside, you can write alcohol. So if you see a hydroxyl group on the inside, it's going to be an alcohol. On a molecule, okay? Another thing is that it gives the molecule polarity. So if you put on the inside of your foldable that hydroxyl groups will make it an alcohol and will make it the molecule polar, at least on the end where the hydroxyl group is, that's all you need to know for AP Biology. Okay. The next one is carbonyl group. Here is your molecular structure. You have a carbon and a double bonded oxygen. Write that on your other flat. Okay? What should you write down for the carbonyl group? You should know that it makes it a sugar. So on the very inside, we're going to see these carbonyl groups on sugars. That's good enough for now, okay? That's enough. 1 word. Keep it simple. You have a lot to memorize in this class. For now, if you recognize that as being associated with sugars, then you're good. The next one is a carboxyl group. Go ahead and write the functional group on the flat. Notice that a carboxyl group has a hydroxide group in addition. So memory aid, carbonyl group is just going to have that single oxygen, or that double bonded oxygen, just one thing. And the carboxyl group is going to have the double bonded oxygen and the hydroxide group. Okay? What should you write on the inside flap for a carboxyl group? You need to write on the inside that it's going to make it an acid. Okay? So go ahead and write down acid in the center. What's a definition of an acid? What makes something an acid? Or what do acids do that define them as acids? Yeah. They change pH. Why? Right. It gives off hydrogen ions in solution. So you can clearly see why a carboxyl group would be acidic and a carbonyl group would not be acidic. So carboxyl group is going to give off that ion on that extra hydroxyl group when it's in solution. So that's going to make it an organic acid if it has a carboxyl group attached to it. Next flap is an amino group. Here's what you're going to put on your amino group functional group so that you can recognize that. Amino groups on the very inside will make it basic. So you can put, it makes it a base, okay? So we'll be talking about those when we talk about those nucleotides in DNA where they have that sugar-base phosphate building block making up DNA. So it's going to make it basic. All right, so you should be able to recognize NH2 as an amino group. Am I going too fast? Yell at me if I go too fast. Oh, all right, sulfhydryl. sulfhydryl is just like it sounds. This is a pretty easy one to recognize because it has sulfur on it. So go ahead and write out what sulfurhydryl functional group would look like. Just a SH attached to a molecule. And that SH put on the inside that is going to help with cross-linking. I know that you don't know what cross-linked polymers are yet, but after tomorrow's lecture you will. Maybe you do. I don't know. But in the very inside, we're going to see those sulfhydryls as creating extra bonds, making things like collagen more fibrous. So on the inside, all you have to write down is cross-linking. Okay? Cross-linking. You can write a little more if you want. Like it makes proteins tougher, makes them stronger. Those long-chain polymers will be held together better if there's more sulfhydryl groups. I'll explain that more later, but just in the very center, you can put cross-linking, strong proteins, or something like that. Just a few words is all you need in the center. The next one is a phosphate group. Phosphate is PO4, 2 negative, okay? And when it bonds, it's associated with energy, okay? We'll talk more about that today. So maybe you could put energy release, energy storage, something like that, or just the word energy. You know what you could put down? You could put down ATP. I'll explain that further today, and that's how we're going to be associating and using and looking at phosphate groups with ATP, okay? So if you just write ATP in the very center, that's how you need to be aware of what's going on with phosphate groups, for the most part. Okay. Oh, another thing that's really important about phosphate groups is it can create a negative charge. So when we talk about proteins folding and how they fold, whether there's positive or negative charges, we'll make them fold in different ways. So in the center, put ATP and put negative charge. And that will help you, okay? I mean, if you took chemistry, you memorized polyatomic ions in chemistry, right? Right? You memorized PO42 negative? Maybe? You're like, I don't remember. Okay, well, memorize it for this class. The next one is methyl group. CH3 is a methyl group. If you know the chemical formula for methane, that's kind of easy to remember. Methane is CH4, so a methyl group is going to be CH3. What should you put in the very middle? Expression of genes. Okay, and I'm going to explain that more later. But whether or not your genes get read or not depends on the amount of methyl groups on the outside. So if you put expression of genes, or if you prefer to say whether or not DNA gets uncoiled, just say expression of genes for now. We'll get more into it later. Methyl markers on the outside of your DNA give an indication to the chemistry of your body of whether to read the DNA or not. You don't need to know that, just put expression of genes, okay? So you should have all 7, do you? Okay, so you can add more in the middle if you'd like. I would say add less, right? I don't want you to memorize a ton of stuff about each because we're going to be learning a lot of stuff this year. That will get you where you need to be. I'm going to talk a little bit about ATP to make sure everybody remembers ATP and what it does. Raise your hand if you've heard of ATP before. I should see everybody's hand. Good. We'll start there. All right. What do you know about ATP? Share something about what you know about ATP. Anything at all. It's totally okay, even if it's wrong. What do you think? Share something. Yep. Energy. Great. Okay. So ATP is an energy storing molecule. So here is the, at least half of the chemistry of ATP. Adenosine, they have just said it's adenosine. You don't need to know the chemistry behind that. Because we're talking about what's going on with phosphate here, okay? How many phosphate groups do you see here? Yell out a number. 3, okay? So that's why adenosine triphosphate is called that, okay? When it's storing energy, there are 3 phosphate groups. When it reacts with water, and we'll talk about dehydration synthesis and hydrolysis today so you can understand those reactions with water, what happens is the addition of water breaks apart one of the phosphate groups. And now what's left is something called ADP. What does the D stand for in ADP? Yell out what you think. Di. What does that stand for? 2, right? So we have 2 phosphate groups here now. That makes ADP. But more importantly, we get that release of energy that happens from this reaction. So ATP is an energy storing molecule that is used to do lots and lots of chemical reactions in the body. It's not the only energy storing molecule. It's the one that we teach you in high school chemistry or high school biology. You're going to learn about other energy storing molecules in AP biology, but I wanted you to refresh your memory on that ATP. Okay, that is that. Now we're going to begin into biomolecules. We won't get through all of this. We'll get through part of this, and then we'll kind of work our way with interactions and demonstrations to help you understand this a little better. So let's start. There are 4 biomolecules, as you guys read about for your homework assignment. There are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. These are big molecules. That's what a macromolecule is, right? Macro is the opposite of micro. So they're really, really big, folded structures, but they all have a unique way they're formed and then unique properties in living organisms. So let's start with first understanding that word polymer. Raise your hand if you've heard of that word polymer. I know it's an end of the year chemistry sort of thing, and we were in lockdown at that time, right? Or whatever you call it, quarantine. But you guys learned that virtually, right? Or do they not teach polymers at the end of the year in chemistry anymore? Or maybe you had chemistry 2 years ago. Did you guys, was that something that was at the end of the year? Okay. All right, good. So you need to know that word polymer. What does poly mean? Yell out your guess. It's okay if you're wrong. Many. Good. So we have many mers. So the mers are the building blocks. The monomers are the building blocks. For example, in life, a lot of the monomers are glucose, right? A sugar, a simple sugar. And if you have a polymer, then it's sugar, 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 sugar. Okay? It's a repeating sequence. Or for example, it might be a nucleotide. And a repeating sequence in DNA would be nucleotide, 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 right? And so we get our sequence and our message in DNA. That's a polymer, a repeating sequence of the same monomer. So to understand how polymers form, break apart, and come together, we need to understand 2 reactions. 2 reactions that are driven by the addition or the removal of water. Water is the means with which all of these molecules come together and pull apart. So you guys are going to need to act this out. You grabbed in the front of the room a card that had an H on it and a card that had an OH on it, okay? On the back of either card, I don't care which one you pick, I'd like you to flip it over to the blank side. And you want to write down dehydration synthesis on one of them. Doesn't matter which one. Dehydration synthesis. Simple slide there. And on the top of the other one, I want you to write hydrolysis or hydrolysis, however you want to pronounce that word.